What's up everyone, PoliticsGaming here, and today we're discussing Energy in Power and Revolution Geopolitical Simulator 4. Before we get started, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's hit 10,000 subscribers soon. I'm doing a $100 giveaway at 10,000, so I'd love to give a very special subscriber $100 to show my appreciation to you all. With that out of the way, let's discuss energy, how to manage it, and what to do to avoid common scenarios of energy mismanagement. When we discuss the word energy, it generally means the production of electricity via electrical facilities, plants, or buildings. Both in-game and in real life, there are typically two types of energy resources. Renewable, meaning that it can be reproduced or is considered unlimited, or non-renewable, which means that the resource it requires is finite or limited. The former example tends to be solar and wind, while the latter example would be oil, gas, or coal. In Power and Revolution, energy is single-handedly one of the most important aspects of the game. If ignored for too long, it can have disastrous, drastic consequences for your administration. If you go long enough without making new energy plants, you'll end up losing power, as power outages will plague your nation. So it's recommended, almost required, that you invest as much as you can into energy plants. Otherwise, your economy will be unable to compete internationally. Power and Revolution is, after all, a geopolitical simulator. Energy has long been a driver for international conflict, military operations, and other types of warfare. During Operation Barbarossa in World War II, one of the objectives of the German army was to secure the oil fields in the Caucasus Mountain region of the Soviet Union. In 1979, Saddam Hussein decided to invade the Islamic Republic of Iran, not only to topple the newly found government, but also to secure the oil fields in the Khuzestan province. And lastly, in the early 1970s, OPEC, or the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, reduced the production of oil and stopped the sale of oil to Western countries in order to retaliate against their support of Israel during the Yom Kippur War, otherwise known as the Ramadan War. In-game, energy is a key player in all policies that the player should decide on. From signing contracts to import oil, coal, or gas, to building pipelines to secure more growth, and selling excess energy to your neighbors, there are plenty of ways to use your supply to your advantage. This gives you the opportunity to increase your position geopolitically and give yourself more leverage. Lastly, energy can be used to prevent the climate catastrophes of global warming. In-game, climate change is simulated with increased disasters post-2030 if the situation of CO2 emissions is not alleviated by the climate objectives set by the COP conferences. The biggest downside to this, other than approval losses, is the loss of economic activity, as well as the hundreds of billions of dollars in insurance payouts and government assistance after major hurricanes, cold spells, and heat waves, as well as major flooding events. It is wise to invest in green energy such as solar, wind, and even nuclear power, while dismantling your fossil fuel plants to lower your CO2 emissions and meet your climate objectives set by COP. Something to take note of starting any gameplay is that each country has a surplus or deficit of energy capacity. This can put pressure on any world leader to solve this as quickly as possible. A solution to this is to import electricity from your neighbors. This, however, is restricted to your immediate neighbors. This essentially acts as if power lines are built between your nations to deliver their agreed upon terawatt hours. This, however, can be difficult if your largest neighbor produces electricity, but you don't want to interact with them economically. It is up to the player to decide their geopolitical ambitions and economic goals. As of the 2023 edition, Power and Revolution features 14 types of energy production facilities, each ranging from 7 categories of production. The effectiveness of each plant wholly depends on your starting country, as well as the goals you set for yourself during this playthrough. For example, if you're playing as a smaller country, it is recommended you seek wind and solar facilities and eventually at least one nuclear power station. Nuclear SMRs, or small modular reactors, are a great, cheap alternative to this expensive plant, however. As the United States, China, Russia, or any modernized or industrialized nation, you need to focus on a much larger plan when it comes to energy production. As your economy grows, your electricity consumption grows as well. In previous editions, there was a quote bug which saw energy consumption skyrocket once electric vehicles and industrial production began to increase, especially after signing free trade agreements and any action which increased consumption of electricity needing sectors. Examples include automobiles, electric vehicles, steel, electronic components and electronic materials, and as well as varying tertiary sectors. This essentially would cause energy consumption to skyrocket to a point to where you were constantly dumping your budget into energy production to offset this, but to no avail, causing blackouts, brownouts, and constant civil unrest due to insufficient energy production. As of the 2023 edition, the calculations relating to energy consumption have been lowered to avoid this. Consumption grows a lot slower now, giving you time to increase production and creating a reserve of electricity than building a facility every few months rather than almost every month. A question I've seen many ask about energy is whether nationalizations are worth it. Nationalizations are explained in my economic tutorial, but effectively, the state controls the manpower of the sector when nationalizing. Increasing manpower is beneficial to increase the sales of the sector and as well as its profits, while reducing it is in order to eliminate the sector entirely. In my own playthroughs, I tend to nationalize the largest producers of energy: offshore wind, nuclear, third generation EPR, and fusion. These produce billions of dollars of revenue and profits and can be beneficial in funding for more plants. Depending on your economic plan, nationalizing these sectors, then selling the shares a few years down the line is a great way to make a quick buck, but also will lose your profits to the sector once those funds run out. Sold shares can be found in a taxation screen where tariffs are found. Essentially, buying the sector to build it up, then selling the sector off to the private sector is a good way to make your money back from investments in energy. A minority shareholder nationalization option is good to continue to make a cut of the profits of the sector, but is wholly dependent on your economic policy, meaning whether you want government interference or laissez-faire economics. As stated before, the game features 14 different facilities from 7 different categories. These are the following: fossil fuels, which burn coal, oil, and gas and produce CO2 emissions; nuclear, which consists of older reactor designs, third generation, small modular reactors, and fusion reactors; hydroelectricity, which uses water to turn turbines and generates electricity; wind, consisting of onshore and offshore as well as mega onshore and offshore, and uses wind to produce its electricity. Solar consists of smaller facilities, about 500 panels, and a mega facility which has 25,000 panels and utilizes the sun in order to produce its electricity. Geothermal energy is essentially a power plant which takes advantage of the Earth's convection currents inside of the planet to create energy such as magma and groundwater and hot springs. These are usually found in the tectonically active areas, but the game does not differentiate between this. Realistically, however, you would want to build these plants near tectonic plates, but this won't have any effect on energy output. Biomass is converting biological organisms and turning them into combustible materials, which in turn is used for energy. Examples of what fuels are used are algae, wood residues, straw, organic wastes, and many different types of plants and feedstock waste which is used for fuel. However, this is actually the dirtiest of the clean energies. While biomass is considered clean, burning wood does release CO2. In-game, biomass uses wood as a required resource, and its effects can be seen with climate change statistics as shown here. Therefore, biomass can be considered a polluting source and should be avoided by anyone trying to avoid using CO2 producing plants. The biggest topic to discuss is the cost benefit of your electricity facilities. In-game, electricity is calculated in TWH or terawatt hours. Essentially, this is a unit of measurement for how much electricity you produce or consume. For those familiar, a kilowatt is what your house usually measures by for the purposes of billing. So your electricity bill is measured off of this metric. 1,000 kilowatts makes a megawatt, 1,000 megawatts makes a gigawatt, 1,000 gigawatts makes a terawatt, and 1,000 terawatts makes a petawatt. So with small nations, you're always going to be dealing with terawatt hours, while major nations will be dealing with petawatt hours. However, it is always going to be shown in TWH or terawatt hours. But once you go over 1,000 terawatt hours, then that becomes a petawatt. Each energy park creates a set amount of electricity, while some will fluctuate depending on their location. The ones with set production rates are fossil, nuclear, geothermal, biomass, and hydro. Those without are wind and solar plants. Each power plant has a benefit and a downside. Nuclear power, by principle, is the safest, most efficient form of electricity in the game and also in real life. It is, however, recommended to wait until 3G EPR plants are discovered rather than using the original reactor designs. This is mainly because older reactor designs are more likely to fail and cause a nuclear disaster, which will become extremely expensive for the player to deal with. As a small nation, it is recommended to buy a 3G EPR plant from another country, and you can even negotiate a good price on it. However, you are not able to change the construction timetable. The main goal, especially for larger economies, is to discover and invest in fusion technology, which produces a whopping nearly 60 terawatt hours per facility. This is heavily recommended to invest in as the United States, China, Russia, and any country with the potential to have explosive economic growth. For non-nuclear facilities, mega offshore wind power is the most efficient despite its massive costs to develop. Only 20 facilities can produce upwards of around 300 terawatt hours of electricity, depending on the location. For landlocked nations, investing in a geothermal, onshore wind, and solar, as well as nuclear or small modular reactor designs is recommended depending on your country and its economic potential. The following table is a description of each energy park's efficiency in correlation to its cost, manpower, and production capacity. Quick shout out to Gabe Vogel for creating this map and helping me finish this tutorial for you guys. Feel free to pause the video and study this table to your liking, and also find it available in the description below. The main takeaway from this table is that fusion nuclear power is the best in terms of its cost benefit, as it produces far more than any other facility. However, a lot of countries will not be able to afford this without saving their quarterly surplus for several years. Therefore, onshore wind is the best in terms of cost benefit and time. A huge note is that wind and solar are heavily dependent on location. Solar is exceptional when used in nations close to or on the equator. This provides the maximum amount of sunlight throughout the year. Something to take note of is that whenever you look at solar and wind, it will tell you that their capacity is 2 terawatts. This is not the actual production rate. This is the maximum amount of power these facilities can generate, but will always depend on the location. So it could be around that number, or it will be around half or just under half that number when you actually place it. Mega offshore wind is largely unaffordable by smaller countries, but can provide massive amounts of electricity, like in the Bay of Bengal off the coast of India. Finally, note that some facilities are placeable and some are not. This is important to note, as during conflict, your enemies may launch rocket or artillery attacks against your facilities, destroying your production capacity. During conflict, a way to protect these facilities is by deploying anti-missile trucks near them to essentially act as a shield and protect them from missile attacks. But this will not protect them from direct attacks or artillery or hypersonic missile attacks. Now that we have covered the best facilities for your country, we will get to cover the natural resources in the game, namely oil and natural gas. Natural resources are represented in the industrial sector and the energy sector. Iron, coal, bauxite, and other types of raw materials are shown in-game as economic sectors you can subsidize, exonerate, and nationalize. In terms of this tutorial, we will only be discussing those listed in energy. In the energy sector, we have 2 different types of fuels we can extract from the planet. These 2, oil and natural gas, are separated by conventional and non-conventional. Conventional oil and gas are extracted through normal oil facilities which use conventional or traditional methods of extraction via pumping and drilling. These are the older methods of drilling which tend to find less compared to its counterpart. Non-conventional drilling, also known as shale, consists of methods which use horizontal pumps and drills that dig sideways into reservoirs of oil and gas underground. This pumps water into the ground to easily extract the resource and is able to extract much more oil and gas than the previously stated method. This is also known as hydraulic fracking, a controversial method of oil production where there is a possible correlation between fracking and dangerous side effects to the local environment such as groundwater pollution and earthquakes. Despite this, in 2015, this led to a massive oil production boom in the United States when production of oil and gas skyrocketed due to this widespread method, and as a result, prices of gas went down. In-game, the law is known as legislate non-conventional gas and oil, which comes in 3 different stages. The first is a total ban on the use and exploration of shale. The second is the authorization of testing and exploration, but exploiting it is banned. This is in case your parliament or people are too hostile against this type of law, so you can gradually introduce it into your country rather than just jumping over the fence right away. The last is the total authorization and exploitation of shale oil, allowing for new shale oil and gas facilities which you can use to drill for this type of oil. Authorizing this law is extremely beneficial to your economic activity and national security, as this provides an abundant amount of oil and gas to protect you from needing to rely on outside trade to acquire it. On the other side of that coin, certain domestic groups will rail against any legislation which provides for the opening of shale and oil and gas exploitation in your country, namely your pacifists, environmentalists, and any far left-wing parties or environmental parties in your country. As well, I've personally seen larger turnout for the Green Party in the United States when massively investing in oil production. After building your oil pumps, whether shale or conventional, you have the option to sell your oil production. You have 2 different ways to do this. Trade automatically happens as you already have an economy which buys and sells products abroad. The purpose of trade contracts is to essentially lock your price in to prevent your nation from being affected by major price fluctuations. When you trade oil and gas with contracts, it gives you the option to choose the type of transportation that is used for delivering from your country to your partner country. The first option will be by train, which assumes that freight trains will deliver the resource via specialized tankers. However, your profit margins will suffer as this choice requires you to transport it through ground connections, thus requiring you to seek a higher sales price to avoid losing money on the trade. This essentially accounts for labor costs, transportation costs, gasoline to transport the train, etc., etc., etc. The second type is through oil and gas pipelines available to be built through your energy tab. This connects from your oil and gas locations and stops in your target country. Pipelines serve as a way to cheaply transport your oil and gas to your partner with nearly 0 cost other than the construction of the pipeline itself. The downside of pipelines is that your capacity is restricted solely to your chosen facility, so if your facility only produces 2.5 million tow, you can only deliver this amount. With trains, you can transport as much as you want. The cost benefit of this is up to the player to decide. Small nations could benefit from a small distance pipeline, while large nations can benefit from additional profitability from such contracts, if their oil site produces enough. Overall, pipelines serve as a cheaper way to export and import oil from partner nations to secure your energy needs. Energy consumption is a large indicator of your economic activity. As your economy grows, consumption follows almost exactly with it. The biggest indicator of consumption is your economic sectors. As explained before, there was an energy bug which basically saw the energy consumption skyrocket the moment your economy started to grow. This bug was fixed, and the explanation was mainly toward electric vehicles which supposedly consume so much electricity during the development of your sector. You can see the percentage of your EVs here in the transportation tab, but be aware that the data might not be the same as in real life, as countries start with the same percentage. For example, in real life, Norway is actually the global leader in terms of citizens who use electric vehicles. Essentially, each sector has a resource that they may consume in order to produce a product. I've explained this in my economic tutorial, so go check it out to learn more. When your electricity consumption begins to go up, you can comb through your sectors to compare your sales and profits to the beginning of the game. This is an indicator of what's consuming more electricity. Sectors such as automobiles, electric vehicles, chemicals, telecom, internet services, and electrical materials and components will consume large amounts of electricity when being developed. Developing, say, your internet infrastructure will lead to your internet service sector exploding, then consuming more electricity in response. The player must plan out their economic policy in lockstep with their energy plan, otherwise their economic strategy will fail. Energy is the most important aspect of any country in the modern world. It drives economic growth and provides for the continuing prosperity of any country. The player must learn to balance their budget while focusing on spending money on energy production and focusing on their geopolitical goals and how their energy plan will coincide with their economic plans. This guide hopes to shed light on the strategies, economics, and costs involved in providing your citizens with clean atmosphere as well as cheap, cost-effective energy. Thank you all for watching this, and don't forget to help the channel out by subscribing and helping us hit 10,000 subscribers. We are so close to getting to our goal, and we are now just 2,000 left from it. I'm so glad to see 8,000 people following my channel, and I'm planning more upcoming tutorials to discuss immigration, military, and the next one will discuss elections in-game, which is a long-awaited tutorial. Keep an eye out for live streams, content, and especially my Mexico series, which is already being premiered. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.